Imagine waking up before sunrise, looking out your window and catching your HOA president in a bathrobe stealing your mail. For weeks, my bills arrived late, cards from family disappeared, and even the IRS claimed I'd lost documents. At first, I thought it was bad luck, until I saw her. Karen, the same woman who fined me for leaving my trash can out, strutting up my driveway like she owned it, yanking open my mailbox, and pocketing my letters as if they were hers. So, I called the United States Postal Inspectors. These aren't your average cops, they're federal agents, and they take mail theft deadly serious. Together, we set up a sting operation. They planted a decoy letter with a GPS tracker. Karen walked right into the trap, slipped it into her robe, and strutted off without a care. What she didn't realize was that the second she touched that envelope, she wasn't playing HOA games anymore. She was playing against the federal government. And when the feds cuffed her on her own porch in front of the entire neighborhood, the so-called queen of the cul-de-sac became a cautionary tale. If you want more insane HOA stories like this one, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the next story is even crazier. They say curiosity killed the cat, but in my neighborhood, curiosity uncovered something much darker: the hypocrisy of a woman who believed she was untouchable. For weeks, my mornings had carried a sense of unease. I'd shuffle to the mailbox expecting bills, letters, or maybe something from family, only to find gaps, missing envelopes. A bill from the power company showed up late, stamped with a past due warning I knew shouldn't have been there. A birthday card for my sister never arrived, though she swore she'd sent it. And when the IRS claimed they mailed me a document I never saw, the pattern grew too sharp to ignore. At first, I did what most people would. I blamed the system. Maybe the postal carrier was careless, maybe sorting got sloppy at the depot. I told myself not to overthink it, but the truth nagged at me. The missing mail didn't feel random. It was too consistent, too targeted. Someone, I realized, was tampering with my mailbox. So I made a decision. I would catch them. One morning, just before sunrise, I brewed a strong mug of coffee and sat by the front window, the steam fogging the glass as the world outside slowly came awake. The neighborhood was still, the kind of quiet where every sound feels magnified. Then, through the pale glow of dawn, a shadow moved down my driveway. At first, my stomach clenched. I thought it might be a stranger, some porch pirate prowling the block. But then I saw her. Karen, my HOA president. She walked with deliberate calm, a lavender bathrobe cinched at her waist, slippers scraping softly against the concrete. She didn't even look around. She strutted up to my mailbox like she owned it, yanked it open, and flipped through my mail with a rhythm that looked practiced, rehearsed. I nearly choked on my coffee. This was Karen, the same woman who preached about community integrity at every HOA meeting, who wrote Violati on notices for having a trash can too close to the curb, who treated the neighborhood like her personal fiefdom. And here she was, stealing my mail like it was the most natural thing in the world. For a split second, rage surged through me. I wanted to storm outside, demand answers, shout loud enough for the entire neighborhood to hear. But then another thought cut through the anger. If she was bold enough to do it once, she'd do it again, and if she was stealing from me, how many others had already fallen victim to her little routine? The next evening, I tested the waters. At our HOA meeting, I casually brought up the missing mail, watching Karen carefully. She smiled, tilting her head so her pearl earrings swung like pendulums. "Oh, you know how unreliable the post office can be," she said with a laugh, brushing it off as if I were the fool for even bringing it up. But it wasn't the words that betrayed her. It was the tone, that smug, dismissive lilt. She wasn't laughing at the postal service. She was laughing at me. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just a petty squabble. This was bigger. What Karen was doing wasn't just annoying. It was a federal crime. Under 18 U.S.C. 1708, tampering with mail carries heavy fines and up to 5 years in prison. She thought her HOA title made her untouchable, that her little empire gave her authority beyond reproach. But she was about to learn the hard way that federal law doesn't bend to HOA rules. And I was going to make sure she learned. The temptation to confront her head-on nearly ate me alive, but I knew how that would end. Karen didn't fight fair. She thrived on chaos, on screaming matches where she could twist words, pull out HOA bylaws, and make everyone else feel like they were the problem. If I stormed her porch and accused her of stealing, she'd laugh it off, gaslight the board, and I'd end up branded the angry neighbor with no proof. No, I needed evidence. The kind of evidence Karen couldn't wriggle out of with a fake smile and a wave of her pearl-studded hand. Proof that couldn't be buried under paperwork or excuses, and there was only one way to get that: call in someone bigger than the HOA. That's when I reached out to the United States Postal Inspection Service. Most people don't even realize it exists, the oldest federal law enforcement agency in the country, and they don't play games when it comes to mail theft. I half expected them to brush me off, but the moment I explained the situation, they listened. Every detail, every missing envelope, every suspicion. One of the inspectors, a man named Lopez, asked precise surgical questions, his tone steady, professional, almost cold. When I finished, there was a pause, then his words came sharp as steel. Sir, if what you're describing is accurate, we're dealing with a violation of Title 18, Section 1708. That carries up to 5 years in prison. If you're willing to cooperate, we can set up a controlled delivery. I didn't hesitate. Tell me what I need to do. The plan was deceptively simple. They'd prepare a decoy envelope, ordinary in appearance, but with a GPS tracker tucked neatly inside. The second someone lifted it from my mailbox, the inspectors would know. There'd be no guessing, no he said, she said. Just hard federal evidence. The following morning, I placed the bait. A plain white envelope waiting in my mailbox like a lasso. Am in the open field. Across the street, a nondescript sedan with tinted windows sat idle, but I knew it was filled with federal eyes, watching. My nerves were a live wire. I clutched my coffee so tightly I thought the mug might crack. Then, like clockwork, she appeared. Karen. The lavender robe again, her slippers dragging across the pavement in that lazy, entitled shuffle. She didn't glance around, didn't even pretend to be cautious. To her, this wasn't theft. It was routine. She strutted straight to my mailbox, popped it open, and plucked out the decoy letter as casually as if she were collecting her own. With one smooth motion, she slipped it into her pocket and turned back toward her house. My pulse hammered in my ears. 30 seconds later, Lopez's radio crackled from the sedan. Trackers moving. Subject heading northbound. Karen had no idea. She thought she was invisible, queen of the cul-de-sac, free to toy with her neighbors like pawns. But this wasn't neighborhood politics anymore. She had just stolen government property, and when you cross that line, you don't answer to an HOA meeting, you answer to the federal government. The car eased forward, tailing her discreetly. I stayed inside, heart racing, watching from my window. My part was done now. This wasn't a neighborhood squabble anymore. It was a sting, and Karen had just walked straight into it. By the time Karen reached her house, the trap had already tightened around her. I watched from my living room, curtains drawn just enough to give me a view of the street. Across the cul-de-sac, Lopez's sedan eased into position, while another unmarked car rolled up quietly from the opposite direction. The neighborhood still slept, unaware that a federal sting was unfolding right under its nose. Karen, of course, looked utterly unbothered. She strutted up her driveway like she was returning from a morning jog instead of carrying stolen federal property in her robe pocket. She slipped inside without so much as a glance behind her. To anyone else, it was just a woman going back into her home. To the inspectors, it was the moment of truth. Lopez leaned against his car, radio pressed to his shoulder. Subject is inside. Tracker shows movement. Stand by. His voice was calm, almost too calm, the way only someone who's done this 100 times could sound. I stood a few paces away, my nerves buzzing, trying not to let the anticipation swallow me whole. Minutes crawled by. Then, Lopez's earpiece crackled. Envelope has been opened. Repeat. Envelope tampered. That was it. The green light. No more waiting. No more suspicion. Karen wasn't just a nosy neighbor or a petty thief. She was officially a federal criminal. The inspectors moved with precision, like choreography. One car blocked the edge of her driveway. Another slowed to a stop near her mailbox. The flashing lights erupted, red and blue bouncing off every window on the street. The silence of the cul-de-sac shattered under the weight of authority. Karen appeared on her porch, clutching the decoy letter in her hand. For a brief second, she wore a smug smile, like she still believed she was in control. But that smile evaporated the moment Inspector Lopez stepped forward, badge raised. Ma'am, his voice was steady, Amanding, you are under arrest for theft of United States mail, a violation of Title 18, Section 1708. Place your hands where I can see them. Karen froze, blinking as though the words couldn't possibly apply to her. What? No, no, this is a mistake. I'm the HOA president. I have authority here. Authority doesn't extend to federal crimes, Lopez cut her off, tone sharp as a blade. Turn around. Neighbors began filtering out of their houses, drawn by the lights. Phones appeared, cameras clicked. The queen of the cul-de-sac, the woman who had built her reputation on intimidation and micromanagement, now stood trembling on her porch as federal agents closed in. Her protests grew shrill, desperate. You don't understand. I was checking. This is my neighborhood. I protect it. Lopez didn't flinch. Ma'am, hands behind your back, now. And just like that, the cuffs snapped shut. The street buzzed with whispers. Some neighbors gasped, others openly smirked. The sight was surreal. Karen, who once lorded over us with fines and violation notices, now standing in slippers and a bathrobe, shackled by cold steel. For years, she'd bent the HOA rules to her will, certain she'd never be challenged. But she hadn't just broken neighborhood rules this time. She had broken federal law, and the law had come knocking. The neighborhood, usually so pristine and carefully curated under Karen's iron rule, suddenly felt alive with murmurs and shifting loyalties. People who once feared her stepped out of their homes with their phones in hand, recording, whispering, laughing under their breath. For years, Karen had thrived on control, writing violation slips for untrimmed hedges, shaming families for leaving toys in their yards, demanding dues with a scowl that carried the weight of imagined authority. She relished being the enforcer. But now, that same audience she used to dominate watched gleefully as her empire collapsed in real time. The inspectors escorted her down the driveway, every step punctuated by the hum of flashing lights. Karen's protests grew weaker with each stride. This isn't right. This isn't happening. I'm not a criminal. I'm the president, she muttered, her words less a defense and more an attempt to convince herself. But no one came to her aid. Not a single neighbor, not even the timid families she used to manipulate into supporting her, stepped forward. As the squad car door slammed shut, Inspector Lopez turned to me. His face was steady, professional, but there was the faintest edge of reassurance in his words. Sir, the charges will stick. Mail theft is one of those crimes we don't just overlook. She crossed a line. You won't have to worry about her anymore. And he was right. Within weeks, the fallout came crashing down on Karen like a tidal wave. The federal indictment hit first, multiple counts of mail theft, each carrying years of potential prison time. Local news outlets picked up the story almost immediately, plastering her name and mugshot across headlines. HOA president arrested in federal mail theft sting became a headline no one could ignore. The HOA board, desperate to shield themselves from the blast radius, moved quickly. An emergency meeting was called, and without hesitation, they voted her out unanimously. The same people who once trembled under her scrutiny now treated her name like poison, cutting all ties before they, too, were dragged down. And the neighborhood? It transformed. Without Karen's grip, the air seemed lighter. Neighbors smiled at one another again. Conversations blossomed where there had once been tension. The cul-de-sac that had felt like a stage for her petty kingdom was finally just a neighborhood again. People laughed about it, sure, but beneath the humor was something more powerful: relief. Karen, once the self-appointed queen, was now nothing more than a cautionary tale. Her lavender robe, her pearl earrings, her morning strut to the mailbox, all reduced to a punchline whispered at block parties and BBQs. The woman who had claimed to protect the community had instead betrayed it, and in doing so, destroyed herself. As for me, I didn't care about the individual letters she stole anymore. What mattered was that justice, real justice, had finally arrived, because when you mess with someone's mailbox, you're not playing neighborhood games anymore. You're playing with the federal government. And unlike Karen, they don't bend, they don't bluff, and they certainly don't look the other way. The street outside my window is quiet again these mornings. I sip my coffee, watch the sunrise, and check my mailbox without fear. And every time I hear the rustle of envelopes inside, I can't help but smile. Because in the end, the HOA's queen fell, and this time, justice wore handcuffs.